of the installation of Radha Vrindaban Natha, Radha Madhava, also the installation of Ananta Shila, that he will explain the significance of that event. And so we'll have Katha with the sannyasis, and we'll be inviting senior devotees to speak after that, followed by Abhishek. The Abhishek, a lot of kirtan, and then there'll be an arti, an offerings and an arti, and then the deities will enter into their original temple. So, for those of you who don't know His Holiness Varsana Swami, he's a very wonderful, exalted devotee who has dedicated his life to establish, under the order of the previous acharyas and Srila Prabhupada, New Vrindavan as a holy place of pilgrimage, especially Srila Prabhupada's instructions to build 7 temples in replica of the original Vrindavan, and to excavate the holy places and the holy lakes that are part of this eternal abode of Sri Krishna. So Maharaj has dedicated his life to that, and you can see the temple of Radha Gopinath going up slowly but surely across the street from the temple, the Prabhupada's palace. And Maharaj is also dedicating himself to writing Krishna conscious literature for the benefit of all of us. His knowledge of Katha, Gaur Katha, Krishna Katha, deep philosophical understandings is something that I relish to hear. So without any further ado, let us encourage His Holiness Varsana Maharaj to speak from his deep realizations and his heart by loudly 3 times chanting Hari Bol. Hari Bol! Hari Bol! Hari Bol! His Holiness Varsana Swami Maharaj ki Jai!
Om Naganatadamandasya Dhyanjana Shalakaya Chakshudamina Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. On this most memorable occasion, celebrating the 50th anniversary of the installation of actually 4 deities: Shri Radha Vrindaban Natha, Shri Radha Madhava, 2 forms of Ananta Shesh, marking a very transitional and transformative time in New Vrindavan history. For the deities to join us here today, along with their faithful servants, His Holiness Radhanath Swami and Chandramali Maharaj. In this most holy place in New Vrindavan, where it all began, by Srila Prabhupada first giving the vision in 68, followed by his actual residence here in 69, and by returning to our roots, we can experience how smaranam, remembrance, enhances, enriches, and deepens the process of kirtanam, shravanam, kirtanam, Vishnu, smaranam, to remember. And in remembrance of the events that connect us to our roots. We are fortified in maintaining and deepening the interconnectedness and harmony with all the branches. Whereas those different branches, in forgetfulness of our roots, cause division, potential conflict. Whereas remembrance of our heritage fosters a sense of unity, harmony, camaraderie, and community. Here in New Vrindavan, where there are so many holy places established by Srila Prabhupada, each one has a story to tell. And each visit, every time we turn and return to our roots, which originated here, the holy places and the holy persons reveal ever new chapters. And pay attention, because in time you will all be called upon to share the story of how from our roots here in Old Vrindavan, where Srila Prabhupada planted and watered the creeper of the New Vrindavan experience. He arrived in '69 at the foot of the Agashura Road, where he transitioned from a relatively new, what do you call it, Lincoln? Or fancy car, to get into a '59 Dodge Power Wagon, customized for his ride by pillows over the bare springs, which formed the seats, and a garland on the dashboard, and exuberant kirtan of the devotees welcoming him for his first arrival in New Vrindavan at what is now the old schoolhouse at Bahulavan. He looked at the old power wagon and said, "Why don't we walk?" And the devotees told him, "No, it's a difficult road. We can take the cow trail, which is like a highway in comparison, over the ridge." So Srila Prabhupada surrendered. He got in the power wagon. They started up the hill across Mr. Snyder's farm, and just when they reached his horse barn, the power wagon quit. And as the devotees were struggling to get it running again, Srila Prabhupada said, "Why don't we walk?" He said, "No, Srila Prabhupada, it's a difficult road." So they tried to get it running. They pushed it backwards, popped the clutch, and it jolted, and Srila Prabhupada was just patiently tolerating all this. Finally, he said, "I'm walking." And they said, "Well, this is the cow trail." I'm paraphrasing, but they showed him that this cow trail is like a super highway compared to the Agashura Road. And he said, "We should stay on our own property so that we're not seen as intruders." And while the devotees are trying to reason with him to take, you could call it the high road, across the ridge, he just started walking up Agashura Road. And when he reached here, he was introduced to Kalia, ISKCON's very first cow. He said, "We don't see cows like this in India. She looks very healthy." And then when he drank her milk, sweetened with New Vrindavan honey, he commented, "Now you have the land of milk and honey." And then he said, "This is the perfect atmosphere for Krishna consciousness." When he drank water from the well right here, which was very sweet, he said, by drinking this water, we can remember Krishna, because he says, "I'm the tasting water." And here in nature, here in New Vrindavan, you have every opportunity to remember Krishna. When you see the sunrise, you know that this is the reflection of Krishna's transcendental form. When you see the moonrise, you know it's a reflection of the rays of the sun. And the wind, and the thunder, and the cows, and the flowers, they're all here to remind us of Krishna. And when Srila Prabhupada watched the devotees for some time working in the fields, because this was all jungle, and devotees without proper tools, what to speak of any equipment, with axes and mattocks, clearing the land, digging out the stumps, and Srila Prabhupada was watching for some time. And he commented, how these American boys, who could have earned good money and high-paying jobs, they're working here in the fields for no salary. And he gave the answer. He said, they're hypnotized. And Pradyumna Prabhu said, you have hypnotized them, Srila Prabhupada. He said, no. What attraction do I have to hypnotize these boys to dedicate their lives like this? It's Krishna. He said, just like Narada Muni was so astonished observing what the Pandavas went through. Banished from their rightful kingdom, their wife insulted, such difficulties, always being hunted down by Duryodhana's spies. And yet their attraction for Krishna just kept ever increasing. And Narada Muni, in wonder, asked, what kind of hypnotist is Krishna? He's so all-attractive. So then, and Srila Prabhupada said, this is samadhi. To be so absorbed in your service to Krishna. Like these boys who are hypnotized. And then Srila Prabhupada, so much like little Dwarkadish Das who'd come from L.A., he said, Mr. DDD, he called him. Are you in samadhi? Because he was really tired. And then Srila Prabhupada's response was, take rest. We see, individually and collectively, as we align our intention by sankalpa with our goal, which is our sadhya, pursued through sadhana, there are times when you'll find yourself surrounded by people who offer you such a profound sense of camaraderie and harmony and unity and commitment that you feel you can accomplish anything that Guru and Gauranga request of us. With that spirit ever rising, in 1973, because Srila Prabhupada encapsulated his instructions in 68 for New Vrindavan. depend on nature by means of agriculture and cows. That was the pragmatic. The esoteric, create a replica of Vrindavan with the 7 temples of the Goswamis, and he specifically mentioned Govardhan Hill, Radhakund, and Shamakund. And he said that this is Govardhan. Not to limit Govardhan, because Govardhan is actually a ridge, which continues on down to Bahulavan. So he gave the instructions to 68. And he mentally moved in. 69, he slipped into the New Vrindavan scheme, or rather you could say the New Vrindavan scheme adjusted to Srila Prabhupada's nature, direction, vision. By 1972, if you follow the paper trail, the letters, he was becoming transcendently impatient. And he said, now begin immediately to build these 7 temples with whatever you have to do so. And in the future, men will come forward to make them first-class demonstration of the aesthetics and culture of the spiritual world. That was the inspiration for, in that very same year, installing Anantashesh. 2 forms of Anantashesh simultaneous to the installation of Shri Radha Madhava. Shri Radha Vrindaban Natha became the presiding deities here, Radha Madhava at Madhuvan, and Anantashesh was installed in the cornerstone for Srila Prabhupada's palace, and simultaneously he was installed at Bahulavan in the cornerstone of what was envisioned to be Sri Radha Vrindaban Natha, which never manifests. So the cornerstone was moved to what was to be the Temple of Understanding, which never happened. So here in New Vrindavan, where you see houses and hills move as if they have an independent nature, even the cornerstone moved, and being concerned of what might happen to him, just being always on the move, which cornerstones don't usually do, I kind of adopted him. And then one day I noticed during a lecture in Kartik on the bank of Radhakund with many devotees attending, I saw that Anantashesh was looking out from the cornerstone because he sat on a silver throne which is placed in a steel box at the bottom of the footer around which concrete was formed. Now, in the course of time and moving so much, the bottom of the cornerstone wore off, the steel rusted through, and Anantashesh was looking out at us. And I interpreted that to mean that he wanted to be placed in a permanent cornerstone that wouldn't be moving all the time like a migrant farm worker who was caring for him at the time. So he took up residence permanently in the northeast corner of the foundation of Sri Radha Gopinath Mandir. Now, we think of deities of Gaura-Nitai, Radha Krishna having their pastimes, which they certainly do. But where did Anantashesh reveal such wonderful pastimes? Beginning before he was even installed. Because when we dug the footer for what was to be Radha Govinda Mandir, on the hill next to the Bhagavad Dharma Discourse site at Bahulaban, the rock was so impenetrable that we couldn't get the footer down to the suitable level to even install the cornerstone, what to speak of pour the footer. So my authorities were asking, what's taking so long? I said, the solid rock. We didn't have the equipment to deal with it at the time. And my authority told me that when Indra wants to smash mountaintops, he sends his thunderbolts. I said, yeah, I remember reading that, but I don't see how practically that's going to help us. Now that day, we were working really hard to prepare the fields for planting corn, and that was before tractor days, so we were using horses and oxen. And it was a hot day, and the animals were so overheated, sweating profusely, and then I could see a dark cloud bank approaching fast with a cool wind, which means if draft animals in the middle of working so hard and being so hot are exposed to what was clearly going to be a very cold and hard downpour, they can get sick. So I rushed them down to the barn, unharnessed them. By that time it was getting late, so I thought, well, I'll just stay in the barn tonight. So I took rest in the manger. Now the manger has a window where you can put hay in from outside, and I noticed all through the night, lightning was striking, but contrary to this common saying that lightning never strikes twice in the same place, every time the lightning struck, it was in the very same place. I was wondering, does this have anything to do with Indra? So the next day, we were rained out from agriculture, so we went back to work on digging the footer, and we had no difficulty breaking through the rock. Now, I'm not saying that Indra actually did it, because if you're practical and skeptical, you can analyze that, water sitting in a footer will loosen up the rock. But I've never seen such a profound loosening of rock overnight. So we dug the footer, installed Anantashesh, simultaneously with Anantashesh becoming the cornerstone for Srila Prabhupada's palace, and the installation of Sri Radha Vrindaban Natha here, Sri Radha Madhava at Madhava. So from this route here in Old Vrindavan, the branches began with those two other villages, because Srila Prabhupada would sit here under the persimmon tree, sometimes under the weeping willow tree, both of which are no longer here, but he would also sit under that maple tree, and he would look in that direction. And he would comment regarding the Agashura road that in one sense, isolation is good. And in India, people will go through tapasya and walk a long way on pilgrimage to visit the deity, but in this country that's not likely, so he asked about building a cable car across the valley. Varsana Maharaja has pastimes with a cable car. So Srila Prabhupada said, do something, build a bridge, a cable car, something, so that gentlemen can come here. And he said, inquire from the neighbors and see if they'll sell you a piece of land where you can start a bridge, you can come over, or a cable car, or whatever. So finally, inquiring from the neighbors, we were actually able to purchase 2 pieces of land, which became Madhavan and Bahulavan. Sri Radha Vrindaban Chanda were installed here in 1971. They moved to Bahulavan in 72, 73. Radha Vrindaban Natha took up residence here. Radha Madhava at Madhavan. Krishna consciousness is not a linear a lineal journey. It is cyclical. And we find ourselves, like we do on parikrama, coming back to the same places over and over and over again. But we're not the same person every time we come back, because we come back on deeper levels with deeper appreciations, and through smaranam, through remembrance, which is the next step after hearing and chanting, Shravanam, Kirtanam, Smaranam. Today is a very fertile opportunity for Smaranam, because here with Sri Sri Radha Vrindaban Natha in their birthplace, we are doubly blessed to have their very faithful, loyal, and loving servants, by the grace of His Holiness Radha Swami and Varsana Maharaja, to share their inspiration and remembrance. Now, after that stage, when you just feel so empowered, like you can accomplish most anything in the service of Sri Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga, when everyone's harmonizing and synchronizing, united in a common vision, there may come a time when your resolve is very seriously challenged. You'll find yourself in association of those who will fan the flames of insecurity, doubt, and suspicion, and question. Now, why would we pursue such a noble goal? And that's where perseverance and faith become, by being tested, they can become very strong. And sure enough, shortly after the installation of all these 4 deities came the motorcycle gang. And that was a very traumatic experience for some, and many left the community at that time. Simultaneously, those who stayed became more fixed, determined, and convinced of our utter dependence on Srila Prabhupada's grace. So opportunity usually comes couched in adversity. And if we lean into the adversity, rather than trying to avoid and protect ourselves with a comfort zone which actually prevents us from any growth, then we will experience the wonder and beauty of Krishna's love and the camaraderie that was so profound in those early days. You know, you can say we didn't have indoor plumbing or running water. There were long periods we didn't have any water because the springs and the wells froze solid. So when you hear about questions like, do you have running water? There were times when all you have is ice, it doesn't run. And Mother Ladini who was like the matriarch of Madhavan, serving Big Jagannath, who was joined by Radha Madhava. And her beautiful, not only beautiful, profoundly meaningful poem, beginning, Vrindavan, Vrindavan, all covered with snow, where did the Surabhi cows all go? And then, verse by verse, she takes us through the ecstasies of living in New Vrindavan in the old days. Because in Madhavan, literally, snow would blow right through the walls and drift across the temple room floor. So she sits, and of course, all the running water, well-watered springs freeze solid, and she's describing it in their successive verses in her poem. Setting the scene for the last verse, where she describes what it's like coming into the prasadam room at night, seeing all and the warmth of the scene where devotees are gathered around in communion and camaraderie, drinking hot milk, hearing Krishna book, before taking rest to dream of Krishna and wake up the next day to embrace the camaraderie. Because we didn't have much back then. And that really emphasized the real treasure, the real blessing. We had each other. And you can't experience the same kind of love for someone as you do when you realize how dependent you are upon them. That applies to devotees as a reflection of our relationship with Krishna. And Srila Prabhupada planted the seed, watered it with his love, and he, as the Acharya's son, brought that little seed to fruition, to grow and expand branches into what is now Radha Vrindaban today. But let us never forget the roots from which it all branched out, right here in Old Vrindaban. And in days before we had any money, any facilities, any comforts, any conveniences, highlighting what is most precious in life, the camaraderie of like-minded souls surrendered to His divine grace, which expands and endures through His devotees. Be faithful servants of Sri Radha Vrindaban Natha, who have come to be with us on this occasion in the form of His Holiness Radha Swami and Chandramani Maharaj. Thank you very much, Srila Prabhupada.
Hare Krishna. I'd like to make a public service announcement. There's water. We've passed out some, but there's plenty of water underneath the front porch of the house. Also, there's porta-johns just beyond these tents here. So let's thank His Holiness Varsana Maharaja with a very loud Hari Bol. Hari Bol! Hari Bol! Hari Bol! So grateful for these incredible realizations of historical points.